I can hear something calling. It's calling me every day. If taking a chance is a crime, then I've got hell to pay. I've been walking the streets in my mind, trying to find a new day. Keep on searching until I will find, until I find a new way. I'm gonna say something, I hope you don't mind. It's time to rearrange. I walk round in circles, I'm going nowhere. It's time to make a change.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I am your host, Charles Wallace, and welcome to the Bare Essentials podcast. As we continue on our journey to build a stronger community, I'm very excited to share with you all the Kindness Alliance, which is a unique free of charge advertising initiative looking to support businesses that share in our core values. Each episode will look to spotlight a different member, celebrating their contributions and dedication to kindness. Would you like to get involved? Just visit the Kindness Alliance section on our website, www.thebareessentialspodcast.com, or just send me a message. And now, a huge thank you to this week's Kindness Alliance member.
Black Pad Coffee Company. Awesome coffee, supporting awesome dogs. Go grab some today at their website, www.blackpadcoffee.com.
Hey Jamie, how you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Charles, for having me on. How are you doing? I'm not too bad myself.
I'm doing well, like you, even though I live in the States. Huge fan of football, and the season kicks off today. I'm really excited. So yeah, it was very exciting for me. I spoke with you the other day, and I was really curious to have you on here as a guest and talk about some of the really cool things that you have going in your life and with your podcast and radio and things like that. With that being said, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so my name's Jamie McCreedy. I'm actually a triplet, which is quite crazy, I know. I started on the radio at age 13. I now have my own podcast, as well as being on the radio. When I speak to professional footballers, fans, and people from around the world, I have a challenge to interview someone from every country, something similar to what Charles has done. Although he's managed to get Antarctica, which I haven't quite yet done out the continents. But yes, Charles, it's a privilege to be on here today. Thank you.
Yeah, Jamie, and I like again, this is a little bit outside of of the guests I would typically have on because, like, obviously, as folks can probably tell, you look at least a little bit younger than me, right? A little tiny bit younger, but no, in all seriousness, Jamie, at your young age of only being 16, and I feel like your content, your podcast, you've already started to make a name for yourself, as a podcaster and being on the radio. So what inspired you to start this at such a young age?
You know what? I think it's from YouTube, actually. So when I was probably 7, 8, 9, possibly a bit older, I was with my best friend, who still today is one of my best friends. And we had YouTube channels of kind of just random things, such as building Lego, eating strawberry laces, and doing these fun challenges. And then in lockdown, in COVID, bearing in mind, I was never actually allowed a YouTube channel. So they got kind of taken down by my dad, especially, and my parents across the way, because obviously I was too young to have a YouTube channel. And then once we hit lockdown, I kind of started to stream a bit more on YouTube. It was because, weirdly enough, in lockdown, I was with my auntie for 2 weeks because I was meant to be there for one day. It ended up being 2 weeks because of COVID and going home, etc., wasn't a possibility. So I started a YouTube channel, only using my Samsung phone at the time, recording Soccer Manager. So I was, doing a save with Liverpool and etc., etc. And then it kind of transpired when I got home. I told my parents, I was like, please let me have this. It would be really cool for me to just do something throughout COVID. And then I think from there, it went to Fortnite, it went to FIFA, it went to other video games. And then I did another challenge in lockdown where I emailed as many football clubs as I can, pretending to be a fan of their team and asking for some free cool signed items, which I've still got to this day. And then from there, I don't know, something just clicked in me where I think we were having a conversation over dinner one time, and there was a conversation about joining radio because I was doing YouTube so frequently. And then obviously I've joined the radio. I was meant to join another radio station, but that didn't go to plan. But yeah, I've now joined Unite Radio. I've been there for 3 years now.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And
Yeah.
well, I'm glad that your parents have allowed you to, or wait, have they allowed you, or is this still a secret to them?
No, of course they know. Of course they know.
I was gonna say, if not, I'm gonna have to get in touch with them and let them know how how much their son has achieved already. I
Thank
think,
you.
obviously, I mean, from my perspective as a parent, um, I I would be extremely proud, and I think you're doing really, really good stuff, especially at
Thank you.
this young age. So, all right, so football. It definitely is a passion of yours. Can you maybe tell a little bit about your earliest memories of football and what it means to you?
Yeah, definitely. So football for me has become a really major thing in my life as the years have progressed. As I mentioned, I am a triplet, so I've got two sisters. So I'm outnumbered in that department. And one of the younger ones, Amelia, I believe she is the middle child. I often forget what one. I'm the oldest, and Katie's the bottom one. So Amelia was always a football fan. She was always having a ball at her feet. And for me, I think my dad's always told me I was never interested. You know, when I was younger, he tried to get a ball at my feet, never was interested. And ever since match attack cards, so it's like these small stickers, tiny ones, and they've got players with ratings on them from attacking to defending. They're kind of like FIFA cards on Ultimate Team, but they're a bit different. And you open them, I think there's about 8 or 9 cards in a pack, and they used to be £1. I'm sure they've gone up now with inflation. And you'd get them, you'd open up your cards, and the idea was to trade with your friends and get better cards as you go along. For me, I never traded my cards, I just kind of kept them. But that kind of got me into football, and I then remember watching my first few games. I remember playing FIFA and scoring my first goal with Emre Can against my now beloved team, Watford and Liverpool over here. Um, but yeah, so I've always loved football down the years, but for me, it kind of changed a bit when I was about 10 or 11 when Liverpool played the Champions League final, or they're playing later in the Champions League, possibly Roma actually in the semi final. It's funny that I still remember that game. And I remember my dad and I were watching it, but I wasn't watching it. I was on my computer playing Roblox or another video game that I was playing at the time. But yeah, ever since then, it kind of just has become a bigger thing for me and a bigger thing. And it's now kind of got to the point where, because I'm doing radio, people are like, you've got to kind of have a bit more than just football. We've got to talk about politics, which I'm also into, and other things like that. But yeah, I think football for me, of course, is such a brilliant sport. And you never seem to get bored of it as well. There's always something going on. However, I'm still waiting for another big moment like Liverpool when they came back against Barcelona in 2019. I'm still waiting for another redemption like that.
That's fantastic. And I really, you got me good when you mentioned about inflation. I'm like, God, 16 and he already gets inflation. I mean, I feel bad that as the younger generation,
Yeah.
you're experiencing inflation, but
Mm.
yeah, let me tell you, it sucks, Jamie. It sucks.
Mm. I
Um,
can imagine.
you know what? Interesting. You mentioned that you want to branch out a little bit. You want to, you talk about politics and things like that. I, you know what? This is a little bit off the cuff right now, but for now with the current state of the world politically, not just in my country here in the States, but your country also. I mean, as a 16-year-old, what do you look at now and think, what the hell is going on with this world? Like, how does it seem to you from your eyes at your age?
It just seems astronomical. It seems crazy to think that people still go to wars. People still want these issues that are man-made. Just live in peace. How amazing would the world be if we could have a bit more peace? We could share land with each other. Of course, there's a lot of talk about immigration, and if you don't mind, of course we can share borders. However, there needs to be a part and a time where, we say, you know what, we've given our share. We need to hold on for a bit. We need to settle down everything again, make sure all the industries are working fine. The NHS, for example, over here is on its last legs. And I suppose that could be part of the reason as to why. But, we also talk about knife crime. We talk about everything in between. And, these issues that are just so man-made. And you always wonder to yourself, for me as a 16-year-old, of course, the world's never going to be perfect. But you would have thought that man-made things like that could be prevented in some way.
Yeah, man, your wisdom at the age of 16 continues to impress me, my friend. I couldn't agree more. I think we've a lot of what we deal with is what I'd like to consider self-inflicted, and there are definitely ways that I hope that what you just stated starts to become more reality because this podcast that I do, and I know things that you do, like I want this world to be better and I want it to be better for my own children and for for you guys, for you and for children you may have down the line. Wait at least 10, 15 years for children. And mom and dad hear this. I'm encouraging Jamie to wait for children, no grandchildren yet for you guys. Um, so so Jamie, I know for me at my age, starting a podcast closer to 50 years old, it was a daunting task to kind of say, how the hell am I going to do this? How am I going to get people to want to get on it? I joke with people. I say, when I started my podcast, I thought my mom would be the only one to maybe watch the show, right? Fortunately, my mom does watch the show and a lot of people do tune in. So that's a good thing. But when you're starting out, I mean, it is a big deal. How did you overcome some of those initial challenges of reaching out and getting people to jump on your podcast? Which, by the way, I think the title of your podcast is incredible. Inside the Mind of, great title. How did you overcome some of those challenges?
Well, firstly, I think you've built a really great community. So credit to you, of course. And the name, I'm not really sure about the name, but I think that came later down the line. It was definitely daunting. But I think for me, when I started 13, possibly 12, but it would have been the later stages of 12, definitely 13. And I remember, because remember I told you there was 2 radio stations that I've been in talks with. And so the first one, I remember it was time for dinner. And I got this call from the station because I sent over some emails to local stations after the conversation about joining radio. And he was like, would be really interested to have you down for an interview. Long and short of it, I had to, kind of say, sorry, I've got to go for dinner. It was about 15 minutes after I've been called. I remember what the dinner was. It was burgers. So burgers and chips. And then I went for the 2-hour interview at the station. And it was like a God-sent opportunity. It was a brilliant opportunity. However, and my head teacher, Dennis O'Sullivan, he was also on the station at the time. And he was doing radio as well, just, as a bit of a hobby for the last previous 3 or 4 years. And then I kind of went to his office because this deal with this radio station didn't come through. And he told me, you don't want to go there. You're going to get played about left, right, and center. Basically, although it was a voluntary-based radio station, they wanted money. So they wanted me to go out and get sponsorships and things like that, which for a lot of people isn't quite sustainable. And they kind of get rid of people every 2 or 3 months. It's really unreliable. So anyway, I'm happy that I had a head teacher who supported me, because let me just add, before I joined this school, secondary school, I was in another all-boys school, which I didn't like. The head teacher was binary opposite, didn't want to help out whatsoever. I didn't like the school. So anyway, I moved to this new school, and I said to him about the radio, because obviously he was on the radio. And he was like, you want to join Unite Radio? I'm on there now. Look at my card here. Have one of my cards as to my show. And I started off on his show for about 10 or 15 minutes, the last few minutes. And I did that for about two weeks, 2 shows. And I said, this is not what I want to do. I want to have my own show where I can talk about football, etc. But you mentioned about being nervous. Of course I was nervous. I didn't have a microphone. I had a headset with a microphone like you use on Xbox or PlayStation. And, I was using it just, talking about football, and I had to retake. And I was getting a bit upset because a 1-hour show ended up taking me 4 hours. Because I was unexperienced, because I was using a new software, Audacity, which we got taught at primary school. And, I still talk about it to my friends. Yesterday, I say I was quite privileged where in primary school, with me and my best friend, Ben, shout out to him, we always had a great relationship. We're still best friends now. And we were working on PowerPoints. We were providing the school with all sorts of cool things electronically in primary school in year 4, 5, and 6 at the ages of 8, 9, 10, with all sorts of things to do inside of the PowerPoint. So we were making all these cool PowerPoints. And yeah, for the school, and we just kind of adapted off there and started, really getting into technology.
Man, Jamie, as you talking about your experiences already, you've experienced probably with a lot of folks hope to have experience by the time they're in their 30s, and you've already done it. It's just really, really impressed, and kudos to you. So you mentioned school. So how, listen, hard for me to balance life, family, work, having the podcast, right? I can only imagine probably different responsibilities, but being 16, how are you balancing your school, podcasting, radio? How do you manage your time and focus on your goals?
That's really interesting, because I think the goal for me is I'm not sure what is the last step. I don't know if I want to accomplish what, I think something in radio, of course, maybe commentary, punditry, something in football would be brilliant. But again, I'm really keeping my options open. To balance stuff out, of course, is really difficult. And I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told anyone is when I was on the radio, I was probably on there by this point at maybe a year and a half, possibly 2 years. And I didn't like it at that point. I was getting bored. I was getting, what do I do now? I'm talking to myself. I don't really like that. I love talking to people, although it was nerve-wracking, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I was just sitting in my room, and I'd do it on a Sunday. So I'd go and play football on a Sunday, and I'd run my heart out. I've tried really hard in everything that I do. So I'd come back very tired, and a lot of the time wanting to sleep, right? Because the games are really early, 9, which is very early for me. Not early for you though. And I'd come home and I'd be like, well, now I've got to do a 1 hour show, which is going to take me 2.5 hours. And I was just like, well, what am I doing? Like, a lot of people are coming home, and bearing in mind, this is where I had to adapt. And my parents are obviously really good at this and kind of guiding me in the correct way without putting any pressure on. Because if I wanted to leave, they would have allowed me to leave with a bit of reluctancy, of course. And a lot of people at this point didn't have any jobs at all. No one was working. Oh, I'm going home, doing homework, sleeping, playing PlayStation, playing Xbox. But for me, it was coming home, doing the show, doing research about the show. Because bearing in mind, the research behind it for you as well is insane for a lot of shows, a lot of people that you have on. So then I was like, well, how can I change this? And I think that's probably about 2 or 3 months in between. And I kind of thought to myself, what am I doing here? Like, I've got the name of being a radio host. I can get people onto the show. And I remember the first person that I had on. Well, bearing in mind, I had a few people on before then. I had Tony, the Newcastle fan, Harry, Tottenham fan, and I had a political journalist in America, John Aravosis, got 500,000 followers on social media, been on all of the big stations in America. And I was thinking to myself, well, why do I not just transpire this into a regular thing? So now I do not talk about football in that way. I don't sit there for 2 hours for a 1 hour show. I just talk to professional footballers, coaches, fans from around the world. And I remember my first show. And I look back at it now, and I don't want to look back at it. Again, I'm reluctant to do so because it can cringe me out but I also know that I've come quite far in the way that I talk and the way I present myself. I mean, look, you look at my YouTube channel, although I made the regret of deleting all my videos. I should have put them on private, but I didn't. I look at some of them now where I've still got 1 or 2 of them left. And, my voice is maybe not as upbeat as what it can be now. And, I think it's definitely changed through that way. I think talking to people, of course, if anyone wants to get into radio or anything like this, is talk to people, because it's one of the most important things and the skills that you're going to need.
Yeah, and I would say this to you too. I think you're fortunate you have a great voice for radio and for doing this, and you're very, very well spoken. So very, again, compliments to you for working on that, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know at 16 if I would have been able to sit here and do the things I do now. Right. I just don't think I would have been able to. I look back at my own life and my own progression, and I definitely was not as far along as but again, when I was 16, we didn't have this ability to even probably do this. I don't even know how we would have accomplished this at that point. But so I wanted to ask you this: what has been somewhat of a surprising impact on you, or a lesson that you've learned from interviewing some of these players and managers?
I don't think in the interview there's something along those lines, but I think definitely something that I have changed is, as we spoke about in the meeting that we had the other day, is the way that I approach people firsthand. Because although people watch the show, and I'm very proud and privileged to have people that love the show, people also don't know the show, and I have to understand that people might not want to come on. Some people, and I won't name names, of course, but there's, for example, I went to Watford a few years ago, and there was this guy there who worked at the club, and quite a high up guy. And all of a sudden, I got his phone number off LinkedIn, and I was like, "Hi, I need this for you to come on the show. It would be a really good honor." And he's one of the 3 or 4 people that I've turned around and said, and been quite, I wouldn't say rude. I wouldn't say rude, because I understand that they have messages coming in every day, and for them, their time's very worth something to them. But it was a bit like, "Do you not know who I am?" And someone else said this in a football club where, without being disrespectful to them, they didn't have one of the high up roles at the football club. I looked them up on the internet. There wasn't too much about them, but I was still happy to have them on. But for me, I think I would definitely change it now. And I have changed it now, where I need to introduce myself more. I need to say, "Hi, I'm a radio host from Hertfordshire. I interview footballers from around the world. Here's some of my previous work," which I didn't do before. And I think that's definitely a lesson that I've learned. And I think it's also to never give up and also to keep going, because for me, I've been lucky again, and I'm sure a lot of people can possibly relate to this. I've had my mum in acting. She was a drama teacher for her career. And my father, who is a brilliant singer, and who, been paid to sing in some of the best hotels in London. So I've had two parents, especially my mum, and my dad can understand this, who has kind of pushed my dad to become a lot more open, a lot more energetic, a lot more bright, without kind of being shy away from who you are. I think you should be proud of who you are. And that, of course, when we were born, I was in acting, I was in dancing, I was in everything to try and build myself a personality, because I feel, and I try and do this today, where now it's my job to try and spread a bit of this love and positivity, etc. Where I'm like, come on, stop being upset, stop being unhappy. Let's be happy, let's be positive. Of course, there's days where you're going to be upset. Of course, you're going to be unhappy at times, but I feel it's truly something brilliant if everyone could just be happy and bounce off each other. I think that's a really cool thing that everyone can have. But of course, that's come from my parents, and that's come from my family. Because my sisters, again, they're in acting, they're in singing. I'm the one that's not in singing, but I'm sure my parents are really proud, because we're going into an industry which they're very relatable to what they were doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about working on getting guests. Jamie, I'll share this with you. Yesterday, I was turned down by two separate emails of no, not interested at this time. And you know what? I respond and say thanks, appreciate you getting back to me, and then move on. It used to bother me a little bit when I first started. I would start to get a little discouraged at like, oh, will I ever get anybody to come on here? Nobody knows who I am, right? But ultimately now I get way more yeses than I get no's. And it to the point where I don't really think about the no's anymore. It's just always move on to the next and try to get somebody else on, because again, and we're going to talk about this now, I think for me, the mission is to really try to help inspire some hope and show people we are capable of more and we can do more. And what I wanted to ask you, and you talked about it a little bit, but and I know being as young as you are, it's probably not maybe something you think about as often, but what's ultimately, the mission if somebody really forced you on it, what's the mission of Inside the Mind of, and what is that message that you're trying to share with your audience?
I think for me, I think if we're looking at it from an aspiring footballer's perspective, it's the fact, and this can sound kind of the opposite of what I'm trying to push on. It's football isn't as glamorous as what people may come to think. The idea of a professional footballer sounds amazing. I'm playing full-time football. I'm living the dream. The majority of professional footballers, as we spoke about the other day, are just getting by. It's very simple. These professional footballers are not on ridiculous amounts of money a week. They probably have 2 or 3 shirts in a season. They're not getting new shirts every game. They wear the same shin pads, the same socks every single game. And I think for me, that is the message for those aspiring professional footballers. I think for the other side of it, for just people that are watching the show, and I'm trying to dive into different routes, politics, or whatever it could be, different sports. And for example, the work I've done in Kenya. So if you wouldn't mind me talking about this. So in Kenya, when I was 15 years old, I got in contact. Well, I got contacted from Gabriella Boyer, who is a football coach over in Kenya, at the age of 15, and he was like, just kind of saying who they are and just putting the name out there, as I would do and you would do on LinkedIn, etc. Putting your name, pushing the boat out there. And he got back to me, and I was like, I really want to try and help you guys out, but I need some things. So obviously we exchanged numbers. I've had a few calls with him, and I was like, I'm going to help you out. I will definitely help you out. But what I need from you is I need pictures of the children. So it's 120 boys and girls. There's an academy in Kenya, 120 boys and girls of all ages. I need pictures to put out on social media to help them spread the message. 3 or 4 days later, I get pictures of all these kids. No shoes. Some of them have flip-flops, playing in flip-flops. They've got signs saying, "Welcome to Lion Sports Academy, Jamie McCreedy. Jamie McCreedy, come and help us. We need some help." So over these months, I was fundraising on GoFundMe, etc. And I managed to get over 55 pairs of football boots, send them over there, and now they've got football boots that will hopefully last them for years and years and years. But for me, again, I could have done that. I may not have done that, but I did it, right? And my parents, when I told them, I was a bit reluctant at the start, because I was a bit like, are they going to tell me that it's hard to do? Are they going to tell me that I can't do it? Are they going to tell me that maybe you should do it at a later time? And I was like, well, no, look, I've got the pictures here of all these children in Kenya, and I want to be that call of help. I want to help them. I want to be the message of that there is hope. You know, people around the world, people are here and people want to help, although there are man-made conflicts and wars, but the majority of people want to help. And, you know, I showed my parents, they were like, wow, like, okay, optimistic, of course, but go for it. And over 4 or 5, possibly 6 months, I did fundraising, research on how to get it there the safest, but the cheapest and effective way so we can get more boots shipped over. Because obviously, the more boots you have, the more expensive it is to ship. Originally, we were going to go with flying it, but then we went with shipping it, best option. It took another 2 or 3 months, so it took about 8 or 9 months to get over there. But it was an honor. It was a privilege to help out these people. And when they got there, I was constantly messaging Kenya Exports, please, when are they getting? When are they getting here? I want to help these people out. They've got a tournament in a few weeks. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, they would have liked the boots in a quicker way. But I kept telling Gabriel, and he completely understands. And I couldn't have done it with anyone better, Charles. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm getting updates to this day. 2 months later, we've got a tournament coming up. We need this, but we're really appreciative of the boost. There's constantly messages being sent back and forth. It's not just now we've got the boost, we're going to go. And I've said I'm really appreciative of this. And this is not the end. I want to go over there. I want to give them more boots. I want to help them out as best as I can. But of course, money doesn't grow on trees. Publicity is hard to come by for things like this. And of course, it takes time. And I'm willing to dig in, and if it is going to take time. But of course, that was just a side project that I've had. But I think, to go back to your question, I think that is also a side of it where people can have hope. You know, people, someone from the UK, regardless of age, and me, has helped someone across the world, over 120 children. I think that's something amazing. And obviously, my parents to this day are like, it's amazing that you've done that. Should definitely be proud of yourself. But of course, I'm proud. But of course, I want to go again.
Yeah, Jamie, that's friggin' awesome, man. Honestly, that is fantastic. And again, I love hearing that. And I mentioned this to you the other day. Someone at your age, I mean, you really help inspire hope in me for the future of our society. And really, really kudos to you for that. See, you were mentioning about hope, and you mentioned about the, aspiring football players and how it's not, as easy as some people might think. Uh, I think this might be a good spot here. We talked a little bit about it the other day, but I think mental health is becoming an epidemic, especially in men who are, a little older, middle-aged, 40s, 50s, right? I just, from the perspective of someone as young as you, and speaking to some folks that are older and, managers, football players, what do you make of the mental health crisis that I'm seeing? And then does it make you, even at your age, be more conscious of your own mental health?
Yes, I think it definitely does. I think that for me, whilst I never had a mental health problem, of course you've got to be aware of it. And I think that can come from all sorts of things. That can be from doing the show that I do, but because I'm constantly working on it, I can be burnt out. I could be a bit unhappy. And of course, there's different sides of mental health. There's long durations, there's short durations. For me, yes, I think it definitely plays a part in the way I talk to people as well. And the epidemic, of course, can become something quite major. I think a lot of politicians now, especially the younger ones, are starting to understand that it is a really big thing, that it is a problem. It's definitely a problem for people. And definitely people with autism and people with ADHD do. It's the fact that they have it a bit harder than other people. And that's something I completely understand. But I couldn't really get to the point as to why, because I think there's so many different reasons as to why. It could be family, it could be, I could even think it can be food. I think with ultra processed food, I think there's a lot of things in society where even going on a walk can really help me out. For example, I've done a show the whole day. I've been working on the show because for me, it seems to be something that can take me 10 minutes. For some reason, it's taking me an hour. I'm not entirely sure why. And then I'll go out on a walk. I don't want to go on a walk, but I go on a walk and I'm like, okay, just kind of taking the mind off things. It's eased it a bit. And, I was never really too big into that. But I'm not going to lie to you. I listen to meditational stuff, ASMR, relaxing things to try and, calm, put me in a decent state of mind at certain times. And I think that can definitely help. I think things online are always there to help. And from a young person's point of view, it will definitely become worse, without a doubt. But then you've also got to help those people that need the help. But then you've also got to think of people doing it for different reasons. Are they doing it maybe possibly for an attention-seeking basis where, I don't know, something's wrong in their family? But, I'm not one to judge on that kind of side. I'm just trying to put both sides of the argument, but of course, mental health is a really big problem. But I don't really know too much about it, but I definitely know that is a problem that is affecting people, especially young people.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you have some awareness and that you're getting to experience some of the things by having your show and by speaking to folks that are a bit older. I think it will give you a different perspective that will be useful for you as you continue to grow with your show and just in life in general. Um, so you're definitely, to me, an extremely humble individual, but I think, how do you handle now the pressures and the expectations that you're definitely somewhat of a public figure? How do you handle that?
I don't think I'm quite yet a public figure, Charles, but I hope to be one day. I think for me, the expectation, of course, because I need to kind of balance it out where people say you've got a radio voice, people say you've got a presenter's voice. From being at school and college going in September, I talk differently to my friends, how I talk to people like you, of course, because everyone does naturally. I think it's kind of a gift where it is a bit different. I think for me, I've definitely kind of changed my element of maybe being a bit too relaxed sometimes. I think I definitely have to hold myself to account a bit more often. I think for me, I think it's just about. I'm not sure. To be fair, I don't really change. I don't think I change too much. I still hold bold opinions if people want to ask me an opinion, but I understand that I have a radio show here and I've got my friends and family over here. So I understand it's definitely different. But yeah, maybe balancing public figure and public life is something I've got to focus on in 10 years or something.
Well, I'm definitely going to be watching for it, and I think it is happening I think it's happening right before all of our eyes, Jamie. I really do. And again, kudos to you. And I think you're in for a very interesting and fun ride. So, well, looking ahead a little bit, do you have any what are your long-term goals for the podcast radio career, and what do you hope to accomplish just over the next few years in the shorter term?
Next few years, the short term, I think just keep going. I think I'm going to the best college that I could possibly go to, one of the best colleges in the world for journalism media. And it's a really great opportunity for me. They're owned by Global, so they've got all the access to the best radio stations, Sky Sports. I couldn't even name you all of them, so many. And the opportunities that they're going to give me there are astronomical. You wouldn't believe it. People would turn around to me and say, "Are you being serious?" So they've got a radio station there, Youth Choice, really well known. If you're into media in the UK, and there's about I think there's 8 radio booths that they've got at a college, and all in the radio booths is all the professional equipment that they would use at the top radio stations in London, the top best equipment you could possibly have. That for me in itself is a big opportunity. So the short term, I think, is just keep going with the show, get really good people on here, keep building a brand and an identity, of course. In the long term, it's a bit mysterious. I think once I finish college, it's going to be weird. It's going to be different because I've never planned to go to university. But I spoke to someone the other week who was telling me, you might need to go to university. I don't want to go. I don't think it'll be beneficial to me. But if I did university, I wonder how much of a hit the show would take. The show's definitely not going to last me forever, as far as I'm aware. I think there's always a possibility to move ships to different stations. But then I've got to think to myself, if I move to another station and then I leave after 10 years, unless I've built myself an identity and a brand, I should really carry on the podcast. And I think, there's definitely times where I look at the podcast and think I can improve, definitely, without a doubt. But there's also times where I think I'm running out of guests to come on. LinkedIn seems to be a bit dry at the moment. There's not too many people that are being recommended that would be good to have on the show. But yeah, I think in the long term, I think it's just about, keep it going. It's the same as the short term. Keep it going and keep understanding that everyone's different. Keep understanding I've got to carry on building this presenter's voice, and of course do more interviews in person, go to more games, take advice of people like you, people that I admire, look up to, and yeah, it's just really great to kind of jump between people, hear what they've got to say, because of course everyone's got a different opinion, and everyone's going to tell me different things, and the majority of those different things are things that I've never thought about, and they're really cool ideas.
Yeah, and I would say, listening to you talk about that, the one thing I would like to say to you now is I think, and this is why I was the name of your podcast, Inside the Mind of. See, I think that name, and I don't know if you meant to do it this way or not, because I know your podcast has a football, you're really focused on football, but I think just that name, it transcends football. I think you set yourself up to be able to branch out into politics, which we just saw that you're, definitely well versed enough to speak to people about that, music, whatever it is, right? I think inside the mind of works with any individual person, industry, and I think you're in a really good spot for that. And I'm looking forward to start to see when you start to interview folks, more outside of football even, right? I think, you're going to start to really develop even more as you do that. I wanted to end with this. Obviously, at the time of this recording, by the time it airs, will probably be a couple weeks in, but ultimately the premiership starting, football starting. I'm excited. I know you're excited. You mentioned about punditry. Here's your shot, Jamie, right now as a pundit. Break it down for us. What do you see happening this year in the Prem?
It's going to be exciting for sure. I think with the teams that have come up, Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich, you've got three really good teams, and I feel every year the Premier League gets better and better and better. There's always, I think Southampton, for example, could do a really good job in another season with another division. I think there's a really competitive nature of this. I mean, you've got a promoted team spending £40 million on Amari Hutchinson. £40 million. Teams who are coming up 10 years ago would be dying for that sort of financial money. Of course, the financial fair play plays a big part because Liverpool are yet to make a signing, the only Premier League club who hasn't done that. Of course, I am a Liverpool fan. I think going into the season with a new manager, it's going to be really interesting. We're now going to play, I think, an even more attacking style of football. Arne Slot plays three at the back when we're in an attacking motion, so I think that can be a really cool aspect because now we're going to have an extra man up the pitch. And of course, we're going to do really well defensively with Van Dijk and Konate and Kwanzaa. I think that could be a really solid back three in an attacking motion. When we come back, it's a back four. I think with other teams like Manchester City, it's going to be the same old from there. I think they're going to have a good season again. I'm not really feeling too much that they're going to have an outstanding season, but I think they're going to have an all right season. Arsenal, again, I think that they're going to have a really good season. I think they could possibly win the Premier League, as much as I hate to say it. But of course, you've got to be honest when you talk about this kind of things. Manchester United, another team that's in transition as well as Liverpool. I think they're going to be interesting watch. I think they're going to be interesting with Ten Hag. I think this is kind of his last shot. If there's any sort of scrutiny with Ten Hag, if they're in a bad position, if they don't make it to a cup semi-final, final, he will be sacked. I don't think that he should be. I think he's a good manager, but it's going to be interesting for Manchester United. Now, one team that for me should not have sacked their manager is Chelsea. Maurizio Pochettino, who's now just gone over to America and become the coach there, he was the best manager that you're possibly going to get your hands on. So I was really kind of shocked. I was bamboozled at the fact that they're going to sack a manager who, towards the back end of the last season, did an amazing job. He had a really good run of games. Enzo Maresca, unproven manager. He's worked under Pep Guardiola. All right. Well, if he didn't work under Pep Guardiola, he wouldn't have had the job at Chelsea that he has now. And I think we saw them in pre-season. They lost 4-0 to a team that I'd never heard of. And they've got really good players in their team. But definitely, and this is up to Bowley and the recruitment of Chelsea, they haven't got world-class players, but they've got players that have potential. Mudryk, Madueke, Nicholas Jackson, Desai, Reece James, although he's got injury problems. I think for Chelsea, there's definitely strong foundations there, but the foundations and the money are not being spent well. I think they've now got 8 goalkeepers going into a Premier League season. It's astronomical. Why? Why do you need to spend £20 million on a goalkeeper that no one's ever heard of to not play any games, send him out on loan, and then get 10 million for him in 3 years? It doesn't make sense to me. Wolves, I think, can have a really good season and build upon what they did last season, although they have sold Pedro Neto. But yeah, I think this season is going to be a really interesting watch. Tonight, it's obviously Manchester United versus Fulham. I think it's going to be a draw. I think Fulham are going to go to Old Trafford with their heads held high. I think United again are in a bit of a rough time, but yeah, I'm backing Fulham to get a point today for sure.
Yeah, that's I really appreciate talking to someone like you and listening to your analysis. I love watching the Prem. Um, I'll make one comment from an American perspective, and I'm going to compare it to what we have over here in the National Hockey League. There were years where teams dominated offensively and they started to play what was called a trap, where they were holding them up and not allowing them to flow as freely. I said to my son last week, I said, I got to be honest. I said, I think I'm watching the blueprint how to approach Pep and City happen with United in the last 2 games. They were willing to clog space, stay strong, and counter. And it happened over a few years here in our National Hockey League, where some of the better players, then they had to adjust. So I'm wondering if this is going to be the season where we start to see Pep having to adjust the style of play somewhat to not be trapped and put in the positions they are, because I don't think they're going to be allowed to play as free flowing and as they do. I think they're going to always keep a lot of control this season, as they always do, but starting to wonder if we're seeing a little chink in the armor. We can only hope, because I root for United, you root for Liverpool, so I think in general we both root against City and Arsenal and other teams like that. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Well, Jamie, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you over this week, and I'm really excited to watch how you progress with your own show and your career. And I'm hoping one day that I'll be sitting there and I'll be watching the Prem and I see you on the sideline or sitting there in the booth somewhere, and I can go, wow, I had that kid on the podcast years ago, you know? So Jamie, where can people find more about you?
Before we talk about that, Charles, I just want to say it's been an absolute privilege today. I've never been so excited going into a podcast in my life. I think it's been a really cool experience. So again, I really thank you. Your podcast in itself, the Bare Essentials podcast, has a really cool meaning, and people can go and find that on your Instagram, go and find that in your bio on YouTube. The story of you doing this podcast is amazing. I've never heard anything like it. It's so unique, so special, and something that can resemble, I think, with a lot of people, with you mentioned, a mental health epidemic. For me, you can find me on YouTube at Jamie, Jamie, full stop, McCreedy, McCreedy. That's on all platforms. And then Inside the Mind of is inside.themindof on Instagram. But YouTube and Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, you can find my podcast Inside the Mind of or Jamie.McCreedy. And yeah, Charles, I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, Jamie, and for everyone listening, I really want to say this. You know, there is a lot of we're extremely divided, unfortunately, right now as a society. And, you know, getting a chance this week to speak with Jamie at, you know, again, his young age of 16, Jamie, I mean this, and credit again to your mom and your dad, your parents, man, you really gave me some perspective. Even at 52, I can learn from someone like you. You gave me some perspective and you gave me some hope. And, you know, you really gave me, you know what, there is hope for this world. And I'm really looking forward to watching your continued journey. And I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
You too. Thank you very much, Charles.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. Please, whether you're a football fan or not, check out someone like Jamie who's doing some really, really cool things. I would appreciate if anyone who watches me and supports me can definitely support Jamie and what he's doing. So thanks again, everyone. Take care. Bye.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.